Hey guys, Michael Patton here, and I am doing a special one of these Theology Unplugged, calling it Apologetics Unplugged. There used to be one that's separate, but now I'm going to do it within this framework. I want to talk to you about Isaiah 53. And who am I talking to? I'm talking to Christians, of course, but I also want this to be for people that are questioning Christianity. Maybe you're just not a believer. Maybe you even call yourself an atheist. Maybe you're a seeker. But I want you to look at a particular passage with me just for a minute and just consider what I'm saying. And then I'm going to have some words afterwards specifically for Christians that you might be interested in as well. But Isaiah 53, most Christians know Isaiah 53, or we should know Isaiah 53, or we've heard people talk about Isaiah 53. But I just want to read it at first and then tell you a little story. So we're going to go to Isaiah 53 here in my Bible Works. And we're reading from the NIV. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no stately form or majesty that we should be attracted to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like from one from whom we hide our face. He was despised, and we held him of low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each one of us has turned his own way, and the Lord has laid upon him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with wicked men. Think of the two guys on the cross, and with a rich man at his death. Think of Joseph of Arimathea, taking him and letting him be buried in his tomb. Though he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And through though the Lord makes his life and an offspring for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life, and he will be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their sins, iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion with the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. You've probably heard that before. I hope you have. I hope you've heard that story. I mean, whenever you look at it, and I talked about the hanging on the cross and the thieves and Joseph of Arimathea, so you know who I'm talking about. But you didn't have to have me say that. You know who I'm talking about whenever we read this passage. Now, let me tell you a couple things about this passage. Number one is it was written 700 years before Christ. You may say, no, Michael, no, I know the Bible, and I know that, it was changed, and, this is many, many years later, and our Bible here, this is the NIV, this particular NIV dates to 1981, I believe it is, so it's changed so many times. No, it hasn't. Actually, you can learn Hebrew, the language it was originally written in, and you can go and you can find manuscripts that date back 200 years before Christ. You say, Michael, no. You think those manuscripts date back 200 years before Christ, those manuscripts of Isaiah, but that's just your opinion. No, it's the opinion of scholars, both atheist and conservative alike. We all know this passage was written before Christ. That's my point. That's the thing you got to swallow down. If you don't believe me, go study it. You'll find this is true. This was written before Christ. Whether you say 700 years or 200 years, it doesn't matter. This was written before Christ. Now, let me tell you the story. I was in Romania on a mission trip, and this was back all the way in 2003 or 2004. And there was a couple of missionaries that knew I was there and wanted me to come talk to someone they had been trying to bring to Christ. They said he's an atheist. They said, will you talk to him? I said, sure. Is he antagonistic? They said, a little bit, but, we're just going to let you guys go to dinner and talk. And I said, okay, great. So we had dinner. And it was this atheist. And he sat across from me, and he was kind of, standoffish a little bit. But he did want to talk, I could tell. And I had my Bible with me. And it was a regular print Bible. This is before we had all of our Bibles on text. And we were sitting there talking, and I said, listen, I want to open the Bible up, and I want you to read a passage, and I want you to tell me what you think. What are you going to do with this passage? And so I opened the Bible up, and I opened it to Isaiah 53, and I pushed the Bible towards him across the table. And he literally took the Bible and he pushed it back at me. And he said, no, Michael. He said, I don't believe the Bible. And I took the Bible and I pushed it back at him. And I said, I don't care whether you believe the Bible. I'm talking about just this one passage. And then I explained to him about how we had the manuscripts of this Bible and when they dated, the exact same thing I just told you. Yet he still pushed the Bible back at me and he said, no, Michael. You believe the Bible is inerrant without errors? I said, yes. He said, I don't. And he pushed it back. And I said, listen, I don't care whether you believe the Bible is without errors. This is a historical document I'm trying to get you to read. And he pushed the Bible back at me again. He said, Michael, I don't even believe it's inspired. And I pushed it back towards him and I said, I don't care whether you believe the Bible is inspired. I'm not trying to convince you of that right now. All I want you to do is to read this one page, not even a full page of the Bible, and it's Isaiah 53. It represents the documents I talked to you about that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls that date back 200 years before Christ. And that's all I told them. Dates back 200 years before Christ. After that, he kind of hesitantly took it and started reading it. And I looked at him for a while, waiting for a reaction. I didn't get anything. His book was his head was still in the Bible, just staring at it. And I began to eat because food was getting cold. And so I ate, and I figured he would respond soon with his objections. But he kept on reading. I ate my entire dinner, and his dinner was just sitting there cold right in front of him. And not a bite taken out of it yet. We had just gotten our food. And by the end, I was wondering, dessert, whatever, everything started to close down. He was still reading. He hadn't turned the page. And finally, he looked back at me and he said, Michael, is there any more passages like this? Because he knew what this passage was talking about. And I said, yeah, there are. There's a couple that are really powerful like this. And he said, can you give them to me? And so I told him a couple other passages to read. And he said, can I have this Bible? And I said, sure. Yeah, you can have it. Of course you can have it. And he took the Bible and he went home. That's last I heard from him specifically. I went back to my hotel, and we continued to, do our missionary trip and do the things. Many days we were there. And a few days later, I don't know how many, 5 or 6 days later maybe, those two missionaries, a husband and wife team, who had brought him or had me go have dinner with this guy, came to me and he met me down in the lobby of the hotel. And they said, Michael, we got to ask you something. I said, yeah, what? And I was expecting to, give them an update about about how the guy was doing. And they said, we got to tell you about this guy. But first of all, what did you say to him? And I told him, I said, well, I told him about Isaiah 53. And then what else? I said, nothing really. I mean, that's just the only passage I gave him. I figured it was good enough and had the gospel in it. And I figured he was, from the West and he knew enough about Christ to be able to put the two and two together. And they said, he cannot stop talking about Christ. He has, at least from our standpoint, become a Christian. And not only that, ever since that day, he has showed up at Bible study and asked questions just like everybody else. And I was really excited about that, obviously. But the reason why I tell you the story is because the impact of Isaiah 53, this particular passage. I mean, there's not a lot of passages like this in the Bible of this caliber of prophecy. Lots of prophecies in the Bible, don't get me wrong. Hundreds of prophecies about Christ and allusions to Christ. But this prophecy is different because it is so incredibly specific. Lots of types, other ones that allude to Christ. And not only after Christ comes do you understand the impact of it. Does it become clear? But this one needs no interpretation. It simply doesn't. It's one of those standout passages of the Bible that we should turn to more often, not only for our own encouragement, but also the encouragement of others and helping people to come to know the God we love, the Christ we love. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? It really is. Now, a couple of things. This passage is different. This is a true predictive prophecy. This is one of those prophecies that are unique. Like I said, we need to be real careful when we're defending the faith, because sometimes we give a number about how many prophecies there are in the Old Testament about Christ, and we give these numbers to atheists or unbelievers or skeptics who are critical, and we tell them, they may read this passage and say there are hundreds others like this. There's really not hundreds others like this. There are, like I said, lots of passages that allude to Christ and after the fact become a typology of him. But there are not many, like I like to call them apologetic predictive prophecies, which means this, that you can give this to an unbeliever and an unbeliever will look at this and see it as a true predictive prophecy. You see, other passages that we look at, say Genesis 3:15, he will bruise his heel, yet he will crush his head, talking about the serpent, talking to the serpent, and the crushing of Satan and the bruising of Christ on the cross. I think it's an incredible passage. I really do. But I do that because I've already accepted Christ and I see it now. I can see that. You can't really give this to an atheist and say, look at that. How can you see that Christ fulfilled that? It's not really clear. This is something that they may say, nah, you just turn that into something afterwards. Or even some of the passages that Matthew uses. In the 3rd and 4th century, you have the Antiochian school of interpretation. And they devised a way to separate those ones that are apologetic predictive prophecies from illusions. And they understood this and the importance of this. Sometimes we don't. In Matthew, he uses a lot of passages that he sees Christ in, like, out of Egypt have I called my son. Now, I believe that that is a prophecy about Christ, but it is not an apologetic predictive prophecy. You can't really use that. You can't hand that passage over and say, look, in the Old Testament it says, out of Egypt have I called my son, and look over here, Christ was called out of Egypt with his mother whenever he was 4 years old. You see, it doesn't really work. It works for me, works for you, because we have already accepted Christ, and it would work for anybody after they accepted Christ, because we can accept typology. But passages like that are more difficult. It goes for the same with the weeping in Ramah, that Matthew sees. Matthew sees a lot of the prophecies and allusions, but he's not referring to them as true apologetic predictive prophecies like we are here. And I want you to set aside something for Isaiah 53. This is very important. Isaiah 53 is different. It is one of those things. It's one of the jewels, one of the gifts of God that he has given to us so that we can be able to do something like I did with that gentleman in Romania. And we need to be using this passage. It needs to be something we understand and we're able to defend the Dead Sea Scroll element of it, when it was found and how it dates, and be able to really establish that. Because once that's established, I don't know what you do with this. It is really, really difficult. I mean, people who accept this passage and still reject it, like you may say, oh, come on, the Jews do it. Well, do they? I mean, listen to them. It's very, very difficult. And whenever you hear this spoken, no, that's just talking about the nation of Israel. That's who that is. That's the individual. Okay, but listen, that's maybe the way they thought of it beforehand. But once Christ came, it became absolutely clear that this was Christ. And there's no way that Christ could have taken all of that passage and said, I'm going to self-fulfill this. I'm going to set up all the elements where this exact thing happens to me, where I'm despised, where I'm pierced for the transgressions of people, where I'm taking their sins, and that's the easy way to understand it. My whole life I'm going to build towards that. You couldn't really do that. And then once you have this established, you can add all the others. And there's lots of others. There's many others that are more like this that can be used as predictive prophecies. But I just wanted to share with you Isaiah 53, and I wanted you to look at this on this Apologetics Unplugged and be able to gain encouragement from it, number one, and also hopefully be able to send this to other people to have them consider Isaiah 53. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Consider Isaiah 53. All right. Thank you, friends, for showing up to this Apologetics Unplugged. Thank you guys for showing up live. You can show up live on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube. Go to my Facebook page, Facebook.com/C Michael Patton, Twitter or X/C Michael Patton. Just about everything I do is C Michael Patton, or you could subscribe to my Patreon. Thank you all for showing up, and we will see you whenever Monday. Today is Saturday, so we'll see